What you're about to witness is the most profound moment of truth ever captured in Judge Frank Caprio's courtroom. When this exhausted 2-year-old single mother walked up to the defendant's stand ready to plead guilty to her third parking violation in 6 months, she had already accepted her fate. More fines she couldn't afford, maybe even jail time for repeated offenses. But then Judge Caprio asked one simple question, a question so basic that most judges never bother to ask it. And when she answered, when the truth finally came spilling out after months of silent suffering, the entire courtroom fell into stunned silence. What happened next would not only change this woman's life forever, but expose a hidden crisis affecting millions of working parents across America, and remind everyone watching that sometimes the most important thing a judge can do is ask the one question that reveals everything. This story shows us what happens when compassion meets curiosity. When a judge decides to look beyond the citation to see the human being behind it, and when one mother's breaking point becomes a turning point that transforms not just her life, but the entire community's understanding of what justice really means. But before we dive into this powerful moment that will make you question everything you think you know about the legal system, less than 1% of you watching are actually subscribed. So please hit that subscribe button, because this story about the simple question that changed everything deserves to reach everyone who needs to be reminded that behind every repeated offense is a story we're not seeing, and behind every citation is a human being fighting battles we know nothing about. It's a gray Tuesday afternoon in mid-March, and Providence Municipal Court is handling its usual docket with mechanical efficiency. The early spring rain taps steadily against the courthouse windows, creating a melancholy rhythm that matches the somber mood inside. Judge Frank Caprio reviews case after case with his characteristic patience. But even he can feel the weight of this particular afternoon. Too many people with too many problems and not enough solutions to go around. The courtroom is more crowded than usual, filled with people who've taken time off work they can't afford to lose, who've arranged childcare they can barely pay for, who've come to face consequences for violations that often stem from circumstances beyond their control. There's a heaviness in the air, a collective anxiety that fills the space like a fog. At exactly 2:30 p.m., the court clerk calls a name that immediately catches Judge Caprio's attention because he recognizes it from recent weeks. Maria Elena Santos, parking violations. The clerk's voice is neutral, professional, giving no indication that this is the third time in 6 months this name has appeared on the docket. Through the courtroom doors walks a woman who looks like she's reached the absolute end of her rope. Maria Elena Santos, a 2-year-old nursing assistant at Providence Memorial Hospital, moves with the exhausted shuffle of someone who's been running on empty for so long that she's forgotten what it feels like to have energy. She's wearing her hospital scrubs under a thin jacket, evidence that she came directly from work, unable to afford the time to go home and change. Maria is small in stature, barely 5 feet tall, with dark hair pulled back in a practical ponytail. Her face shows the kind of exhaustion that goes bone deep, dark circles under her eyes, lines of worry etched across her forehead, a tightness around her mouth that suggests she's constantly bracing for the next disaster. Her hands tremble slightly as she clutches 3 citation papers, her shoulders slump forward with the weight of too much responsibility and not enough support. But what captures everyone's attention most powerfully is Maria's expression. It's not anger or defiance or even fear, it's resignation. The look of someone who's given up hoping for mercy, who's accepted that the world is stacked against her, who's just trying to get through this day so she can move on to surviving the next one. She walks to the defendant's stand with the air of someone heading to their own execution, convinced that nothing she says will matter, that no one will care about her circumstances, that she'll leave this courtroom worse off than when she entered. Maria is here because over the past 6 months, she's accumulated 3 parking violations, each for parking in a residential permit zone without the proper permit. The violations all occurred on the same street at approximately the same time, between 10 p.m. and midnight. The fines have escalated with each offense: $50 for the first, $75 for the second, and now $100 for the third. Combined with court costs, Maria owes nearly $300, which might as well be $3,000 for someone living paycheck to paycheck while supporting 3 children on a nursing assistant's salary. But here's what the citations don't show, what the paperwork can't capture, what no one has bothered to ask Maria about in her previous 2 court appearances: the why behind the violations. Everyone sees a repeated offense, assumes it's carelessness or disrespect for the rules, and processes the case accordingly. No one has asked the simple question that would reveal the desperate circumstances driving Maria to break the same rule over and over, knowing each time that she's risking more fines she can't afford. Maria approaches the defendant's stand and stands with her head bowed, waiting for Judge Caprio to pronounce whatever sentence he deems appropriate for someone who clearly hasn't learned her lesson. She's been in this courtroom twice before in the past 6 months, each time promising she wouldn't let it happen again, each time leaving with a fine and a warning. Now she's back, a repeat offender, and she knows the judge's patience must be exhausted. Judge Caprio looks up from the file, and something about Maria's defeated posture, her visible exhaustion, her resignation, makes him pause. He's seen thousands of repeat offenders over his 38 years on the bench, people who don't care about the law, who treat fines as the cost of doing business, who show no remorse or intention to change. But Maria doesn't look like those defendants. She looks like someone who's drowning and has given up calling for help because she knows no one's coming. Miss Santos, Judge Caprio begins, his voice measured but not unkind. I see this is your 3rd parking violation in 6 months. All 3 citations are for the same offense, parking without a residential permit on Elmwood Avenue. You've appeared in this court twice before, paid your fines, and yet here you are again. Before we proceed, I need to ask you something. The courtroom goes quiet, everyone expecting the judge to ask why she keeps breaking the same rule, why she hasn't learned her lesson, why she thinks the law doesn't apply to her. But Judge Caprio asks something different, something so simple and so rarely asked that it catches everyone off guard. Miss Santos, why do you keep parking on that street? What's happening in your life that makes you risk these fines over and over? Maria looks up, startled, her eyes meeting Judge Caprio's for the first time. She opens her mouth to respond, then closes it, clearly unprepared for a question that actually invites her to explain rather than simply plead guilty and accept her punishment. For several seconds, she struggles to find words, her face working through emotions: surprise, relief, fear that if she tells the truth, it might make things worse. Your Honor, Maria's voice is barely above a whisper. I park there because I have to. Judge Caprio sets down his pen, giving Maria his complete attention. Tell me why you have to, Miss Santos. Help me understand what's happening. And that's when the dam breaks. That's when months of silent suffering, of trying to handle everything alone, of believing no one would care about her circumstances, finally finds a voice. Maria's words come out in a rush, tumbling over each other as the truth she's been carrying alone for so long finally has somewhere to go. Your Honor, I work the evening shift at Providence Memorial Hospital. I'm a nursing assistant. My shift ends at 10 p.m. and I take the bus to the hospital because I can't afford parking there every day. It's $15 a day, and that's money I need for food for my kids. The bus costs $2. But when I get off work at 10 and take the bus home, I don't get to my neighborhood until almost 11 p.m. because of the route and the transfers. Maria's voice begins to shake, but she continues. I have 3 children, 8, 6, and 4 years old. Their father left 2 years ago. Doesn't pay support, doesn't call, just gone. My mother used to watch them while I worked, but she had a stroke last year, and now she needs care herself. I can't afford a babysitter for the evening shift. That's $40 a night, and I make $15 an hour. I'd be working just to pay for childcare. Judge Caprio's expression has changed from judicial neutrality to focused concern. His full attention on Maria as the pieces of her impossible situation start coming together. Go on, Miss Santos. I'm listening. So my neighbor, Mrs. Chen, she lives on Elmwood Avenue, 3 blocks from my apartment. She offered to watch my children in the evenings while I work. She doesn't charge me anything. She's a grandmother herself, and she says it keeps her company. She gives them dinner, helps them with homework, puts them to bed. She's an angel, Your Honor. Without her, I couldn't work. I'd lose my job, lose my apartment, lose everything. Maria's hands grip the edge of the defendant's stand, her knuckles white. But Mrs. Chen doesn't have parking at her house. It's all street parking, and it's residential permit only. I don't have a permit because I don't live on that street. I live 3 blocks away. When I get off the bus at 11 o'clock at night, I have to go to Mrs. Chen's house to pick up my children. They're sleeping, so I have to carry them first, the 4-year-old, then come back for the 6-year-old, then the 8-year-old can walk, but she's half asleep. It takes me 3 trips to get them from Mrs. Chen's house to my apartment 3 blocks away. The courtroom is absolutely silent now, everyone understanding where this is going. Everyone's starting to see the impossible situation Maria's been trapped in. But I can't carry 3 sleeping children 3 blocks at 11 o'clock at night, Maria continues, tears beginning to stream down her face. It's not safe. It's too far. So I drive my car to Mrs. Chen's house when I get off the bus. I park on her street while I gather my children, get them settled, and then I drive us home. It takes maybe 20 minutes. But 3 times now, in those 20 minutes, I've gotten a ticket for parking without a permit. Maria's voice breaks completely. I know I'm breaking the rule, Your Honor. I know it's wrong, but I don't know what else to do. I've tried carrying them. The first night after my first ticket, I tried to carry all 3, and I dropped my 6-year-old. He scraped his knee and cried, and I felt like the worst mother in the world. I've tried asking Mrs. Chen to bring them to my apartment, but she's 73 years old, and she can't carry sleeping children either. I've tried waking them up and making them walk, but they're so tired, and the 4-year-old just sits down on the sidewalk and won't move. And I can't drag 3 exhausted children through the streets at midnight. Judge Caprio's hands are gripping his bench, his eyes filled with the kind of emotion that 38 years of judicial experience can't harden him against. Miss Santos, why didn't you explain this in your previous court appearances? Maria's answer is so simple, so heartbreaking, that it explains everything. Because I didn't think anyone would care, Your Honor. I thought you'd just say the law is the law, that my problems aren't your problem, that I should figure it out. Everyone's been telling me to figure it out for 2 years. The social worker said I need to figure out childcare. The housing office said I need to figure out my rent. The school said I need to figure out why my kids are tired all the time. Everyone wants me to figure it out, and I'm trying, Your Honor. I'm trying so hard, but I don't know how to be in 3 places at once. I don't know how to work full-time and watch my children. I don't know how to pay for parking permits on streets I don't live on. I'm just so tired of trying to figure out what can't be figured out. The courtroom is absolutely silent, except for the sound of Maria crying and several spectators trying to stifle their own sobs. Court officers stand with their heads bowed. The court reporter has stopped typing, her hands frozen above her keyboard. Everyone in the room is confronting the same uncomfortable truth, that they've been watching someone drown in plain sight, and calling it a parking violation. Judge Caprio stands up slowly from his bench, removes his glasses, and for several long moments, he simply looks at Maria with an expression that mixes sorrow, anger at the systems that have failed her, and profound respect for the strength it took for her to keep going this long. When he finally speaks, his voice carries the weight of everything he's learned in 38 years of seeing how the law affects real people in real circumstances. Miss Santos, Judge Caprio says, his voice thick with emotion, "I want to thank you for your honesty. And I want to apologize to you on behalf of this court and frankly on behalf of every system that has looked at your situation and told you to figure it out instead of figuring out how to help you." Maria looks up, startled by the judge's words, clearly expecting judgment and receiving something else entirely. Judge Caprio continues, now addressing not just Maria, but the entire courtroom. Ladies and gentlemen, what we've just heard is not the story of someone who doesn't respect the law. This is the story of a working mother, a healthcare worker who takes care of our sick and elderly, who is doing everything humanly possible to provide for her children while working full-time. She's found free childcare because she can't afford to pay for it. She's taking the bus to save money. She's working evening shifts that pay slightly more than day shifts. She's sacrificing sleep, health, and peace of mind to keep her family afloat. And we're punishing her with fines because for 20 minutes, 3 times in 6 months, she parked her car on the wrong street while collecting her sleeping children. Judge Caprio's voice becomes stronger, more passionate. This is what's wrong with how we enforce laws without understanding circumstances. We see repeat offenders and assume carelessness or contempt. We process paperwork without seeing people. We enforce rules without asking why they're being broken. Ms. Santos isn't a criminal. She's a hero. And instead of helping her, we've been fining her for doing what any good mother would do, whatever it takes to keep her children safe. And guys, if this story isn't already making you angry at the systems that trap hardworking people in impossible situations, if you're not already understanding how poverty makes everything harder, including following rules, hit that like button. What Judge Caprio does next and the community response that follows will prove that sometimes one question asked with genuine compassion can change everything. Judge Caprio looks directly at Maria, his tone becoming gentle but firm. Miss Santos, all 3 of your parking citations are dismissed. You will not pay a penny in fines. Not for the previous citations, not for this one. You've paid enough. You've sacrificed enough. You've carried enough. Maria's legs seem to buckle slightly, and a court officer moves closer in case she faints. Your Honor, she whispers, I don't understand. Why would you? Because the law is meant to serve justice, Ms. Santos, and there's no justice in punishing you for being a good mother. Judge Caprio looks out at the courtroom, but I'm not just dismissing your tickets. I'm going to do something else. I'm going to use the platform I have as a judge to ask this community a simple question. How have we let a healthcare worker, a mother of 3 young children, a woman who's doing everything right, fall through every crack in our social safety net? How is this acceptable? Judge Caprio picks up his phone from the bench. With your permission, Ms. Santos, I'd like to make some calls. Maria nods, too overwhelmed to speak. The judge dials a number and puts it on speaker. This is Judge Frank Caprio calling from Providence Municipal Court. I need to speak with the Director of Parking Enforcement immediately. Yes, I'll wait. The courtroom watches in stunned silence as Judge Caprio, live in court, calls the Parking Enforcement Office. When the director answers, Judge Caprio explains Maria's situation and makes a request that's both simple and unprecedented. I have a resident who needs a temporary parking permit for Elmwood Avenue. between the hours of 10 p.m. and midnight, 3 blocks from her residence, so she can safely transport her 3 young children home from their child care provider. This permit needs to be issued today, free of charge, and renewed annually until this family's circumstances improve. Can you make that happen? The director, clearly caught off guard by receiving a call from a sitting judge about a parking permit, stammers through a response. Your Honor, the regulations for residential permits require proof of residence on that specific street. I understand the regulations, Judge Caprio responds. I'm asking if there's discretion to grant an exception for extraordinary circumstances, and if there isn't discretion, I'm asking you to create it. Because if we can't bend parking rules to help a healthcare worker safely transport her sleeping children, then our rules are serving bureaucracy instead of people. After a brief pause, the director agrees. We can issue a special circumstances permit, Your Honor. If Ms. Santos comes to our office, we'll process it today. Judge Caprio isn't finished. He makes a second call, this time to the director of the Rhode Island Housing Authority. I have a single mother of 3 working full-time as a nursing assistant who's trying to figure out childcare, transportation, and keeping her family safe on a salary that's barely above poverty level. She needs to be moved to the top of the waiting list for subsidized housing. I don't care what regulations say about waiting lists. This is an emergency situation that we've ignored for too long. Make it happen. A third call goes to the hospital where Maria works. This is Judge Frank Caprio. I'm calling about one of your nursing assistants, Maria Santos. She's been parking violations trying to pick up her children from childcare after her shift ends at 10 p.m. I'd like to know if Providence Memorial has any childcare assistance programs for employees, flexible scheduling options, or shift differential pay that might help this situation. With each call, Maria stands at the defendant's stand sobbing, unable to process that anyone is finally helping instead of just telling her to figure it out. With each call, the courtroom watches in amazement as a judge uses his platform not just to dismiss a ticket, but to dismantle the systems that created the problem in the first place. When Judge Caprio finishes his calls, he addresses Maria directly once more. Miss Santos, you're going to go to the parking office today and get your permit. You're going to receive a call within the week about subsidized housing. And the hospital is going to review your case for additional support. But more than that, I'm going to make sure your story is heard because you represent thousands of working parents in this city who are doing everything right and still can't win. That needs to change. Maria finally finds her voice. Your Honor, why are you doing all this for me? You're not just anything, Ms. Santos. You're a healthcare worker who takes care of our community's most vulnerable during a pandemic that never really ended. You're a mother who's raising 3 children alone without help from their father. You're a woman who found a way to work full-time while ensuring your children have safe, loving care. You're someone who kept going when every system told you to figure it out alone. That's not just anything. That's extraordinary. Judge Caprio's voice becomes even more passionate. And I'm doing this because that one question, why do you keep parking there, revealed everything. It revealed that we've been punishing someone for trying to be a good mother. It revealed that our enforcement mechanisms don't account for human circumstances. It revealed that we've built a society where working full-time isn't enough. We're doing everything right still leaves you one parking ticket away from financial crisis. That's not acceptable. And if I can use my position to fix it for even one person, to shine a light on it for everyone, then that's what I'm going to do. The courtroom erupts in spontaneous, sustained applause. People are standing, crying, applauding, not just for Maria, but for the recognition that someone in power finally saw the problem and decided to act. Maria covers her face with her hands. her shoulders shaking with sobs of relief, exhaustion, and gratitude she never expected to feel in a courtroom. As Maria leaves the courtroom that day, several spectators approach her. One woman hands her a gift card for groceries. Another gives her a bag of children's clothes her own kids have outgrown. A third slips her phone number into Maria's hand. I run a parent support group for single mothers. We meet every Thursday. You don't have to figure everything out alone anymore. The video of Maria's courtroom hearing goes viral, but the response is different from typical viral court videos. This isn't entertainment, it's a wake-up call. Within 24 hours, Providence Memorial Hospital announces a new emergency child care assistance fund for employees. The City Council holds an emergency session to discuss expanding parking permit flexibility for residents facing child care transportation challenges. Local child care providers reach out offering sliding scale evening care. The Community Foundation establishes a micro-grant program for working parents in crisis. But the most immediate impact is on Maria herself. Within 3 days, she receives her special parking permit. Within 2 weeks, she's moved into subsidized housing with parking included. Within a month, the hospital adjusts her shift to end at 9 p.m. instead of 10 p.m., allowing her to pick up her children an hour earlier. And throughout all of this, Judge Caprio stays in touch, checking on her progress, making sure the promises made in his courtroom are actually kept. 6 months after her court appearance, Maria returns to Judge Caprio's courtroom, not as a defendant, but as a guest speaker for a community forum on work-family balance and social support systems. She stands before the same crowd, but this time her shoulders are back, her head is high, and her voice is strong. Your Honor asked me one simple question, Maria tells the audience. Why do you keep parking there? Nobody had ever asked me why before. They just told me the rule I was breaking and the fine I had to pay. But Judge Caprio asked why, and when I finally had permission to tell the truth about what my life was like, everything changed. Not just the parking permit, everything. Because someone finally saw me, really saw me, and decided I was worth helping. Maria's voice becomes emotional but steady. I want every single parent out there who's struggling to know that you're not alone. I want every person who's trying to figure out impossible situations to understand that sometimes it's not your job to figure it out. Sometimes the systems need to change to support you. And I want every person in a position of power to understand that one question asked with genuine compassion can reveal everything. Don't just enforce rules. Ask why they're being broken. Don't just process paperwork. See the people. Don't assume repeat offenses mean disrespect. Consider that they might mean desperation. Judge Caprio, listening from the panel, adds his own reflection. Ms. Santos taught me something I should have learned a long time ago. I've been on this bench for 38 years. I've seen thousands of repeat offenders. And until I asked Maria why, I never questioned whether our systems were creating the violations we were punishing. How many other parents like Maria have stood before this court, paid their fines, and left still trapped in impossible circumstances because I didn't ask the right question? The judge's voice becomes a call to action. One question changed everything for Ms. Santos. Imagine what would happen if every judge, every social worker, every teacher, every employer, every person in a position to help asked that same question, why? Not as an accusation, but as genuine curiosity. Why are you late? Why can't you pay? Why do you keep doing this thing that's clearly hurting you? The answers might surprise us. They might challenge us. They might require us to change systems instead of just punishing individuals. But they might also reveal opportunities to help that we're currently missing because we never bothered to ask. 1 year after the viral video, Providence implements a program called One Question Initiative, training court officials, social workers, teachers, and city employees to ask why before taking action. The program is specifically designed to identify people like Maria, individuals doing everything right but still falling through systemic cracks. In its first year, the program identifies over 300 families in crisis and connects them with resources before their situations deteriorate into legal violations, evictions, or family separations. Maria completes her nursing assistant training and begins working toward becoming a licensed practical nurse with scholarship support from Providence Memorial Hospital. Her children thrive in their new stable housing, with their mother working more reasonable hours. Mrs. Chen, the neighbor who provided free childcare and inadvertently created the parking dilemma, becomes an honorary grandmother to Maria's children and receives recognition from the city for her community service. But perhaps most importantly, Maria becomes an advocate for other working parents trapped in similar, impossible situations. She testifies before the state legislature about the child care crisis. She speaks at hospitals about supporting healthcare workers who are also parents. She shares her story at community events, always emphasizing the same message. We need to stop telling struggling people to figure it out and start figuring out how to support them. This case became more than a dismissed parking ticket. It became a movement challenging how we think about law enforcement, social support systems, and community responsibility. It proved that sometimes the most radical act of justice isn't dramatic or complicated. It's simply asking why with genuine intention to understand and help rather than to judge and punish. The story of Maria Elena Santos, the exhausted mother whose breaking point became a turning point, reminds us that behind every repeated violation is a human story. Behind every rule breaker might be someone trying desperately to follow rules that conflict with each other. And behind every fine we impose without understanding circumstances might be a family one crisis away from complete collapse. One question asked with compassion changed everything, not just for Maria, but for an entire community that finally started asking why instead of just enforcing what. And guys, in the comments below, tell us about times when someone asks you why instead of just judging what you did. Have you ever been given the chance to explain circumstances that seem like violations but were actually desperate solutions? Because Maria proved that sometimes the most powerful intervention isn't complicated policy changes or massive funding. It's one person in authority asking the right question and actually listening to the answer. If this story moved you, if you understand how poverty creates impossible choices and then punishes people for making them, share this video with everyone who works in systems that serve struggling families, teachers, social workers, judges, healthcare administrators, anyone with the power to ask why before taking action. Subscribe for more stories that prove compassionate curiosity can change lives, that enforcement without understanding causes harm, and that sometimes the simplest question can reveal the most complex truths. And remember Judge Caprio's wisdom. One question changed everything because it moved the focus from what Maria did to why she did it. That shift from judgment to understanding, from enforcement to support, from punishment to problem solving, is what transforms law from a blunt instrument into an actual tool for justice. Maria didn't need stricter enforcement or higher fines. She needed someone to ask why and actually care about the answer. We all do.